Hey everyone, it's Alex again. And a lot of my students have been asking me about the process of purchasing a MacBook or a MacBook Air, MacBook Pro or a MacBook Air, for doing their video production and graphic design work. And obviously the challenges, the expense, and the fact that Apple computers are just in that upper bracket of high performance computers that cost a lot. And what is the solution? What I've been recommending to a lot of people is if you can splurge for the 16-inch MacBook Pro, it's a great choice. But nowadays MacBook Airs have come so far along. They're actually very effective at doing graphic work, even 4K editing. If you consider sort of a top of the line MacBook Air of today, compare it to just a couple years ago, the top of the line MacBook Pro, the MacBook Air is just as powerful or more powerful. So we were succeeding, editing on those MacBook Pros from years ago, from 2015, 2016, just fine. So getting a MacBook Air could save you maybe like $1,000 and still do the job for you. The only other difference is you don't have the touch bar at the top of the screen. So, if some of you were wondering about that, the touch bar, it's this kind of it appears at the top of the keyboard, and it's a nice little thing. It's not necessarily something you need though, and you will see them on MacBook Pros. Yeah, so here I just wanted to show you some examples of them. Really, it's this kind of bar here that you might expect. You won't see that on a MacBook Air, but at the same time, is it worth $1,000 more and the slight increase in performance? So, just wanted to walk you through the steps of obtaining a MacBook Air for your graphic design and video editing needs. So, the first thing I would recommend, especially if you're a student and if you work in education in any capacity, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do, let me type in Apple Education. Okay, Apple Education, because you want to make sure you go to the education store. Now, even if you're working as, a classified staff, even if you're working as a groundskeeper, I think you should get the education deal for Apple. I really do. Okay, let's go a little slow here just because I've been doing a lot of here. But anyway, Apple Education pricing. So once you search for Google Apple Education, it will put you through the Apple Store, and you will see that the pricing is now based on the prices of with the educator's discount. It depends on the machine. Sometimes it's $100, $150, $80. It just depends. So in our case, we're gonna go to Mac. And what type of Mac do we want? We want a new MacBook Air. You can see there's been newer models that were released in recent months. That's why it's up there. So once you go to that screen, you'll see you come here and it brings up a little graphic of it. And there's a little explanation of what it is. You can go ahead and click on that buy, the blue buy button. Okay. And that'll take you to a screen here. You're still in the education discount portal, so don't worry. You come down here and you'll see there's a couple different options here. There's different options for the color. If you want to be space gray, gold, or silver, that's sort of just the way the computer itself looks, the case of it. And then, of course, there's two different models they're having you choose between here. One is even cheaper than the other. If I were to be honest with you, I would probably go with this one on the right for the slightly larger price, just because there's a couple, differences that I think are important enough that it makes it worth it. I don't think you'd want to go to too low a solid state drive. And just having a little bit more speed, the i5 versus the i3 processor, I think will make a difference here. But we're not done yet. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to choose gold because I just feel like gold. Why not? Then I'm going to go and select this one, the $1,199. That's with the student discount included. It would be a little bit more if not, and click select. Okay. And then it's going to take me to this next page here. Customize your MacBook Air Gold. Okay, so a lot of people ask me, okay, like what do we want? And this is my recommendation. if you want to spend the extra 150 and go up to an i7, it's not a bad idea. An i7 is, of course, faster processor than an i5. The bigger thing, though, is I would invest in 16 gigs of RAM versus 8. So I definitely pay the extra 180, which brings it up to 1379. I know it's not going to, don't worry, it's a little increase, but it's worth it. 16 gigabytes of RAM is going to really help you. That's if you have multiple programs going, if you have an editing program going and there's a lot to remember at one time, the random access memory of the computer, you just want a lot of that. It's going to really help you with 4K editing. If you have the extra 150, maybe splurge for the i7 versus the i5, but you don't necessarily have to. Even with the 16 gigs in the i5 1.1 gigahertz quad core 10th generation, you're still going to get a lot of power and be able to do your Photoshop, do some animation and so forth. Now storage. Here's another place where you could upgrade it. I honestly would save the money and just do the 512. This is, just if you want more internal storage. The important thing is that it is a solid state drive. Solid state drives are better than RPM drives, but of course, they're not even offering RPM drives. They just want solid state, so that's great. I think you'll find if you're doing projects and you need to exceed the 512, you can plug in an external drive. You can pay for an external drive. So, that's usually how you do projects. If you're doing editing projects, graphic design projects, you eventually get an external drive to store it on. So as long as you have enough internal hard drive space to save your programs, it should be sufficient. So I would leave it on this one and save the money. I mean, this is a lot to pay. It's up to you. You could if you want to get the 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte, but it's not really worth it in my opinion. Okay, so then going on to the keyboard. This is if you want it to be in English or a different language. I would put it in English. If you do speak a different language, you could do it in a different language. But if you're in the United States and you're getting a job, the good thing is if you speak, Japanese and that's your primary language or so forth, you can actually buy skins for your keyboard and still kind of have a laptop that you could bring to work. And, if you're worried about, oh no, now I have to interact with, English speakers and you can still keep English as the primary one, but you can get skins for different languages. Okay. So this is pretty much what I would recommend. At the very least, get the 16 gigs of RAM. It's up to you if you want to splurge on the extra for the Intel i7. So then you go to, and it comes, with your charger and so forth. You go to add to bag. Okay. And it should take you to the next screen. I'm going a little slower here because again, I've been doing a lot of tutorials today. They offer a couple extras here. Now, this is up to you. Now, the USB-C to USB adapter, this is if you have a hard drive that needs USB to plug in. To be honest, there's a lot of these on Amazon. You can get some that are like even less than this. I might wait and just get a third-party one. Okay. So some of these peripherals, you might want to get third party. The Apple Care, that's something to think about. To be honest with you, they give you 1 year of care automatically. And in most cases, I think it's always been the case, unless, as far as I remember, unless this has changed, but you can always get the Apple Care later, even after you buy the computer. The 1 year is something that they give you as a 1 year warranty. This is to give you 3 years of warranty. So, you could decide to get this later if you don't want to get it up front. So let's go ahead and say I don't want any of these. They get some other stuff here, cases and mice and all this. Honestly, a lot of this you could buy later. So they're trying to sell stuff. Okay, so we go to review bag at the top here. And it should bring you to your final screen here. Yeah. And at this point, it's just a matter of checking out. Now it's going to be like if you bought something on Amazon, you're going to start punching in your info. If you don't have an Apple ID, you probably want to make one. You can go and check out as a guest. You'll need an Apple ID anyway eventually, so you might want to do this, but that's totally up to you. At this point, you just buy it and you have it shipped to you. So I hope this tutorial was helpful. This is sort of a recommended more affordable option. Under, I guess with tax, it might get up there to a little over $1,400 depending on the state you're in, but in California certainly it'll go a little over $1,400. But That's better than it being 24, 25, 26, 2700, which is, and actually, if you fully soup up your MacBook Pro, it could even be north of 1,000. So it's a great option to give you a lot of power to still do video editing, to still do graphic design. You're sacrificing the touch bar and a little bit of performance, but honestly, in 2020, most computers, especially Apple computers, they can do the job, and just make sure you get the 16 gigs of RAM. That's the only place where you might have some slowdown if you were down to 8. But anyway, yeah, so go forth, get your MacBook Air, and enjoy.